What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. We are coming off of an awesome Monday night game. Lions come away with the win, 40-34. Dan Campbell said this week that they were going to play this game normally, despite the fact that they had nothing to play for, and they still have to take on the Vikings next week for the top seed, all those sorts of things. They were going to play this game normally, and that is exactly what we got from Jared Goff and the entire offense. Obviously, a lot going on at the end of the game there. Brock Purdy getting hurt, hand, wrist, whatever it was on his right hand. Joshua Dobbs comes in, leads them on a touchdown drive, which, I'll just say from the jump, not a big fan of. I spoke on the pregame show heavily with Adam Kaufman about what my take for the Lions. I also said this same exact thing this morning when I was on the early line with Ben and Donnie, saying it wasn't just about the Lions minus 3.5. It was the Lions minus 6.5 and minus 9.5. And that's where we were before this garbage time touchdown from Dobbs that was run in. Because the Lions were going to go out here and score some points, and they were going to get some revenge for last season's NFC Championship game, which they could not close out. And this was to a T what I said was going to happen, and that did happen up until the last 50 seconds of this game. So personally, I am upset about that. We have some props that cash, though. The SGP that I spoke about on the pregame show, that's a winner. So yes, I would have loved to have seen all of the bets come through. But we got about, let's call them 80% of the bets come through today. So I really wanted to end the season with a perfect sweep, and we just didn't get there. So here's the SGP on the board, up at plus 430. Lions money line, they come away with the win. Brock Purdy goes over 255.5. He goes way over that with 377. Juwan Jennings. Now, we did get the yards from Juwan Jennings when Joshua Dobbs came in there at the end on that last drive. So, we win some, we lose some, right? We won the SGP because Jennings got those yards because Joshua Dobbs came in at the end. And as Troy Aikman just said on the broadcast, they were teammates in college. So I guess that's a win. And then, of course, we see Goff. I altered him down a little bit. I was a little bit worried about the potential game script if the Lions got out ahead. And realistically, the Lions could have had more points. They had that fourth down play at the end of the first half or so when it was a pass to Sam Laporta that was incomplete on fourth down. So they could have had 47 points. Granted, 49ers could have had more as well with Purdy throwing the interception. So the SGP plus 432 is a winner. Alting the Lions, that didn't work. Now, the Lions did cover minus 3.5. So I did talk about the Lions just coming away with that normal spread. So the minus 6.5 didn't come through. The minus 9.5 didn't come through. But then I also specifically spoke about Brock Purdy and Juwan Jennings going over their normal props, which were 255 for Brock Purdy and then the 62.5 for Juwan Jennings. So two straight props come through. The side for the Lions comes through. The SGP comes through. And then the two alts, garbage time, are losses. But all in all, a great day. Now, what do we have from the 49ers? If Brock Purdy actually has some type of hand issue that they were checking out and he's not good to go in the final week of the season, it could be Joshua Dobbs out there, right? It could be Joshua Dobbs out there, Isaac Guerendo, Debo, and the rest of the offense. Now, when it comes to the rest of the offense, what a breakout game for Ricky Pearsall. 8 catches, 141, the 1 touchdown. George Kittle, 8 catches, 112 from him. And I kind of mentioned this on the pregame show with Adam Kaufman. I'm saying, get Ricky Pearsall out there. Let's see what they got with him. Debo Samuel, 3 carries for 16 yards and the 1 catch for 5 yards on that little pop pass for the TD. Other than that, he had no other targets in the offense. No other passing targets for him. Just that one little pop pass where he got the touchdown. So we have 4 total touches from Debo Samuel. We had 10 targets to Ricky Pearsall. See what you have in this young talent wide receiver that you drafted in the first round out of Florida. 141 yards. Awesome game from Ricky Pearsall. And I don't want to look too far ahead, but he should be an eye you have on literally next August when you're drafting your fantasy team. Ricky Pearsall should be a player you keep an eye on. George Kittle doing his thing. Juwan Jennings, 7 catches, 67 yards. A good game. He does go over his prop. Obviously, Kittle, Ricky Pearsall flies through their props. Ricky Pearsall's prop was 25, 26.5. He literally quintuples that, which is absolutely unbelievable. So Guerendo working the passing game, the 4 catches for 65 yards. Actually didn't do a whole lot on the ground. Only 9 carries for 34 yards. Falls below both his yards and his carries. get to the line side of things and start to look ahead at some props. We do have some props posted for the Bengals game on Saturday. We'll go through all of this. Stay tuned here on Pro Football Today post-game show with myself, Tom Vecchio. We're coming up against a break right now. Again, Lions win 40-34. They cover the 3.5-point spread. Obviously, they come away with the money line win, and we see the over fly over. Stay tuned here, SportsGrid.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Well, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. We are coming off a huge Monday night game. Lions coming away with the win of 40-34. Let's just quickly touch on the same game parlays from the pregame show with myself and Adam Kaufman. Adams comes through flying colors. Obviously, his was a little bit simpler. Just trusting Goff, trusting Gibbs. We know where the ball's going to when it comes to Gibbs. And he didn't take their money line like I did, and he also didn't take the 3.5-point spread. Changed it a little bit, goes to the alt spread of -2.5, obviously getting it inside that key number. Goff with the yards, Gibbs with the yards. So both mine and Adams' SGPs cashed to close out the regular season. Great stuff overall. And again, when it comes to the Lions side of things, they operated just 100% normally. 100% normally, and that's what Dan Campbell said they were going to do, and it's great to see. So for Jared Goff, 303, the 3 touchdowns from him. His line was sitting at 247 or so he flies over that, the 3 touchdowns. Gibbs, 18 carries, 117, 1 touchdown on the ground. Craig Reynolds got involved a little bit, 7 carries, 31 yards. At halftime, I did specifically mention taking Craig Reynolds over 23.5 rushing yards, so that did cash. When it comes to receiving, we didn't see a massive game from any one player, as we kind of saw on the other side for the 49ers with Pearsall and Kittle both going for over 100. But Jameson Williams had the touchdown. Laporta had a touchdown. St. Brown had a touchdown. So all 4, do we have the pregame touchdown odds for the Lions? Or not just the Lions, but just pregame touchdowns for all of these players? Because the 4 main players for the Lions all scored. Gibbs, St. Brown, Williams, Laporta. The 4 players all scored. And that's who the ball goes to, right? 8 targets for Williams, 8 for Laporta, 10 for St. Brown, 4 in the passing game for Gibbs, and obviously add in the 18 on the ground. Like, their offense is super condensed. Outside of Craig Reynolds getting a few touchdowns, a few touches here or there, we know exactly where the ball is going to. And of course, the rushing touchdown from Jamison Williams as well. So awesome game for the Lions. Huge game on tap coming up for them, going up against the Vikings. So I think we can put a bow on this. The one thing I would take away is if the Lions, nothing changes in their offense, we know what's going to be happening for the 49ers. I guess the Brock Purdy news is going to be impactful when they play the Cardinals next week. And it could be Joshua Dobbs at QB, probably still Grendo in the backfield, and maybe we'll look to Ricky Pearsall props if nothing is too dramatically different. As I said, we do have props posted for the Bengals and the Steelers. It's the first time, that they're I haven't seen them on any other sports book, so they're posted on the FanDuel Sportsbook. I already jumped in on Joe Burrow over 37.5 passing attempts. This is what I spoke about on the pregame show, that Joe Burrow's number is always 36.5 or 37.5 when it comes to passing attempts. The line has already moved. It's 37.5. It's now minus 125. It was minus 120 just a little while ago. This is the spot to take it. At the end of the day, the Bengals have a top 5 offense when it comes to pass play percentage. Add in the fact that Chase Brown was banged up this past week with the ankle sprain. His status is to be determined for this game. Now, we know that Khalil Herbert got traded to the Bengals from the Bears earlier in the season. So there are touchdown props as well for all these games. Jamar Chase is minus 150, not betting that. Higgins, minus 115, not betting that. Don't even want to go to George Pickens or Najee Harris or Khalil Herbert. I don't have interest in any of these players. And the touchdowns actually may be a little bit. I should be setting the stage with this game and not just jumping straight into the props. It is a 1.5 point spread for the road Bengals taking on the Steelers, is a 48.5 over under. Face value, I want to say the under in this game just because of the importance of it for both teams. Technically speaking, the AFC North division is not locked up for the Ravens just yet. Just, for housekeeping, it's actually not locked up yet, but they would have to lose to the Bengals. And we would need to see the Steelers win. So I want to lean under just because of how important this game is, but given how bad the Bengals are on defense, we can't possibly be doing that. And we know that the Bengals can go out and drop 30 points against anyone, even a good defense on the Steelers side of things. So we have some passing props. We have some receiving. There's a ton of receiving props. And then there's just a few rushing props with Harris and Warren for the Steelers. So we can go through all this. We're coming up against a break right now, but we can go through the rest of the TD props. We will seriously look over the receiving props because I'm expecting Joe Burrow to be throwing at a high rate because they're not going to be moving the ball, I don't want to say at all on the ground, but maybe not effectively on the ground, especially if you're dealing with what is essentially a third string running back with Khalil Herbert. We'll break all this down on the other side of the break. Stay tuned right here. Pro Football Today post-game show.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. Monday Night Football just ended. Awesome game to end the regular season, at least the Monday night games. We are on to Week 18. Whole lot going on. It starts on Saturday at 4:30. The Ravens are 17.5-point home favorites taking on the Browns. We have a 42.5 over-under. As I mentioned prior to the break, the AFC North is not technically decided yet. The Ravens need to win. The Ravens need to win. In order for the Steelers to win, they would have to, A, beat the Bengals, and then the Browns beat the Ravens. We all know that's not going to be happening. The question becomes is, how long will we see Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews in this game? You know, what we have seen from the Cleveland offense over the past 2 weeks with DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson at the helm for the Browns has been absolutely terrible. Just terrible. Now, we got to remember that he came in halfway or 3/4 through the game against the Chiefs 3 weeks ago. Last week, when it was full DTR starting, 6 points against the Bengals. This past week, it was 3 points against the Dolphins. It is absolutely terrible. Terrible production. So, if we see the Ravens get out to a 17-ish point lead, as the spread would indicate, we got to assume that Lamar and or Derrick Henry, et cetera, will all be pulled at a certain point. So it's a tough game to bet. Obviously, 17.5 points is an insane spread for the NFL. There's no props posted for this game. When we get to the Bengals and the Steelers, as I mentioned, far more interesting because we would hope to think two competent offenses. Obviously, one can be lacking with the Steelers in recent games. Well, we got to be looking at some of these longer options for a touchdown. We just got to. We can't be looking at anyone that's minus 150, even plus 110. I just don't have any interest in going there. And this is just a personal thing. If people want to bet on Khalil Herbert at plus 120 or plus 115 for George Pickens just because you think their defense is so bad, and we saw what Marvin Mims did, et cetera, the Bengals can't stop anyone. I fully agree with that. I'm just not betting on someone that's a plus 110. Moving down the list, Pat Freiermuth is plus 310. So if we are still buying into the narrative that the Bengals defense can't stop anyone, and we are dealing with a 48.5 over-under, we should be seeing some amount of points. Let's take a little bit of a longer shot on Pat Freiermuth. Now, obviously, at plus 310, these odds are dramatically different than something that's at plus 115. It's near even money. So you can decrease the unit size at Pat Freiermuth and put a quarter unit on them, a half unit, whatever it might be, just because the implied probability is that much lower when he's at plus 310. When it comes to the receiving props, this is where we got a lot of juice. There are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's about 8 or 9 players listed here. Obviously, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins leading the way, and 92 and 74 respectively. George Pickens is here at 67. You know, Mike Gesicki is coming off an awesome game, and his number is still only 25.5. That's an interesting line, along with Pat Freiermuth at 33.5. These are the spots I may want to be looking for some value this week. Gesicki at 25.5. That's where we could be looking. I also have interest in going to, it might also be a play with Pat Freiermuth. Oh, Mike Gesicki, 2.5 receptions at minus 128 right now. That is very interesting. So there's some interesting spots, at least at first glance, when it comes to this. When it comes to the passing props outside of Joe Burrow, who I absolutely love, over 37.5, which was sitting at minus 120. It is minus 125 now. I have plenty of interest there. Maybe going to a Russell Wilson over 36.5 for his longest pass is something that we can look at. Not only does he have that in his repertoire and the play calling now that George Pickens is back, but the lack of pass defense from the Bengals is so apparent that there's going to be value in some of these passing / receiving props when it comes to the Steelers. Even if we would agree that the Steelers haven't shown us a whole lot on offense in recent weeks, you may not think Russell Wilson is an amazing quarterback anymore, or overall, whatever you want to say, and they don't have a ton of passing options outside of George Pickens. The shots down the field will be there, especially if, in fact, we do see the Bengals get out and ahead. Now, they're only 1.5 point favorites. It's not like some massive line. So some kind of combination of, let's see, George Pickens, his longest reception is 27.5. Now, you would like to say we get the double dip where we do get George Pickens not only going for over 27.5, but he breaks that 36.5 line for Russell Wilson, that we could cash them both on the same play. So there's a lot to break down specifically for this game. As we move on to some of the other games on the slate, there's not going to be any props posted for these games as of yet. Obviously, a lot of these teams are dealing with circumstances where we may not be seeing some players play. For example, this Houston-Tennessee game, I'm almost positive, like literally 24 hours ago, the line was 3.5. Yeah, as you're seeing now, the line was 3.5. It might even be 4.5 last night. Almost 24 hours to the dot last night when I did the post-game show after Sunday Night Football. The Texans were, I want to say 4.5 or 4. Definitely 3.5 as you see there, but it's down 1.5. So maybe there is some hope that the Texans will play their starters. Now, as I mentioned last night, the Texans are locked into their spot. And they've been locked into their spot, let's call it for what it is. They've been locked into that 4 seed for a while. They were never moving past the Ravens. They were never moving up to the Bills or the Chiefs. We understand that they won the AFC South. They've been locked into their spot. I have hope that the Texans will at least play their starters for at least the first half. Why? Their offense was absolutely horrible last week against the Ravens. They got shut out, right? The Texans scored, 2 points because that safety. They lost 31-2. So you got to say that the Texans go out there for the first half and you just have to score. You just have to have like some momentum going into the playoffs. And you can't sit Stroud and Mixon and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz and these guys. Like, you have to at least have the confidence going to the playoffs that they can score. You can't rest them and say, hey, we haven't scored in 3 weeks an offensive touchdown. So I want to have faith in the Texans at plus 1.5. And I want to have faith in the Texans' first half spread. I'm not seeing that as of now, but the Texans' first half, because if they get out there, they score, they put up 20 points, 2 touchdowns, maybe a couple field goals, whatever it might be, some combination of that. And then they pull Stroud and Mixon and Nico Collins, and they let the game play out. Because again, a loss doesn't hurt them, a win doesn't help them, but at least build that offensive confidence. So the first half spread for the Texans could be vital, but I'm not seeing that at least as of now in the FanDuel Sportsbook. And of course, always shop for the best lines available. If it's plus 1.5, you would be getting them at a solid number. That's my initial lean there. When it comes to the Packers, I also think the Packers are 9.5 point favorites going up against the Bears. It's a 40.5 over under. I also want to look to something with the Packers, maybe like a team total over. Again, we're not going to be seeing any movement for them when it comes to the playoff standings for the Packers. I believe they're locked into or I guess that they could move up to the 6th seed. So they're at 11-5. Commanders are also 11-5, depending on how the tiebreaker scenarios work. If the Commanders were to lose and the Packers were to win, that could impact it. But again, based on what we saw from the Packers against the Vikings, the Packers played bad for, let's call it 75-80% of the game yesterday. Packers team total, again, it's the Bears. They should be able to put up some points. So again, Packers, even if they can't move up in the standings, we'll have to double check the tiebreakers throughout the week. But just get out there and score some points, build that offensive confidence. And then if they happen to pull their starters in the 3rd or 4th quarter because they're up by so much, and again, maybe not moving up doesn't help them or whatever it might be, the Packers just need to score to build that because Love did not look good for, again, like 3 quarters yesterday. And then you want to bring Malik Willis in. It is what it is. So Packers team total and Texans first half, I'm going to have a ton of interest in once it gets posted. We're coming up against a break right now. We can run through some of these key games. Obviously, some of these games have 0 playoff implications. Not going to be talking about Jaguars, Colts. No one cares about that game. Let's talk about some games that actually have some playoff implications and or teams that need to build confidence heading into the playoffs. Stay tuned right here on SportsGrid postgame show. Coming up against a break right now. See you guys on the other side.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. Monday Night Football ended. Big win for the Lions. One quick note, Adam Schefter just tweeted about Brock Purdy in regards to the issue. He said that head coach of the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, told reporters that Brock Purdy is dealing with a nerve issue in his right elbow. And they're going to undergo further testing this week and non-committal on his playing status in the regular season finale. Obviously, a game that is not impacting their season in any capacity. So, again, if it's not him, it'll likely be Joshua Dobbs, who came in at the end there, and maybe looking to some Juwan Jennings props, because apparently they have this on-field connection dating back to college, which, of course, will be fun to go after in Week 18. So we ran through some of the Saturday games, or not some of the Saturday games, both Saturday games. Browns at Ravens, Bengals at Steelers. Obviously, the Bengals need to win, and then they need to see the Dolphins and the Broncos lose. So let's talk about those games. The Dolphins are 1.5-point road favorites visiting the New York Jets. It is a 40.5 over-under. This is one of the 4 p.m. games. As of now, I've not seen any update on whether or not Tua Tagovailoa will be back at the helm for the Dolphins. Obviously, Snoop Huntley leading them to a victory yesterday. Good performance from him. He had the 1 passing and 1 rushing touchdown. They won that game 20-3, if I remember correctly. So it's a 1.5-point spread, 40.5 over-under. There's obviously no props posted. This line, I would assume, would move in the favor of the Dolphins if Tua were to get ruled in. If you like the Dolphins, I would say jump on them now at -1.5. That line probably moves to 2.5. It's not going to be a massive movement. It's not going to be like multiple, 3-4 points. It's going to be probably to 2.5, maybe to 3 if Tua gets ruled in. But it's obviously having them, it'd be better to have them at 1.5 now if you do end up ultimately on that side. Now, the other game that is a note for the Bengals to round this all together would be the Broncos at home, 9.5-point favorites hosting the Kansas City Chiefs is a 39.5 over-under. Obviously, with the Chiefs having the number 1 seed locked up, it is, I don't want to say just extremely unlikely, but it is an almost absolute certainty that we will not see Patrick Mahomes. We may not see Isaiah Pacheco. We may not see Travis Kelce, especially DeAndre Hopkins. I wouldn't say no. Obviously, as a veteran, get him that rest. But they're just not going to have these players play. Now, some of them may be active. Obviously, teams are only allowed to have so many inactive players. So Mahomes may not technically be inactive, but he may be dressed, but he's just not going to be starting. It's going to be Carson Wentz. And it's going to be Carson Wentz and the Chiefs, who do still have a very good defense, going up against Bo Nix and the Broncos, who need to win. And if they don't win, in order to make the playoffs, I believe they need to see the Bengals and the Dolphins both lose, and then that's the only way the Broncos could lose and still make it. Obviously, you don't want to be banking on that. You want to control your own destiny. So the Broncos -9.5. I'm not laying -9.5 with the Broncos. I still think the Chiefs are a great defense overall, and I will take the 9.5 points with the Chiefs. The 39.5 over-under is super tough. You would like to think that the Broncos would show some type of resilience and go out there and score some points, but ultimately the Chiefs offense could still get yards and still get points up against a mediocre Broncos defense who have kind of fallen off as the season has gone on. They collapsed in the second half against the Chargers on that Thursday night game 3 weeks ago. And then they just gave up an immense amount of yards and points to the Bengals. Now, this is not to say that Carson Wentz and potential backups from the Chiefs are the same thing as Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, obviously not, but 39.5, especially for that game, I think it feels right, and I lean on the over. Don't want to make a commitment to it now. The next game I have a ton of interest in is the Buccaneers at home, 13.5-point favorites taking on the Saints, 43.5 over-under. As I mentioned on the pregame show with Adam, this game is obviously all going to be about Mike Evans. Mike Evans. When do Mike Evans props get posted? Not only is Mike Evans pushing towards 1,000 yards for the 11th straight season, but the Buccaneers need to win. This is the ideal spot where we have a team that needs to win and we have a player that has separate motivation. And we will see throughout the week different contract incentives for teams. As Adam mentioned on the pregame show, Zach Ertz had that big catch where he needed 2 catches. And you could look at, across Twitter, and Adam Schefter tweeted about it, like he had the catches, the yards, this, that, the other thing. And he comes away with an extra $750,000 contract incentives. And this is what players will be chasing. And whether it's a Brock Bowers yesterday with rookie records, Malik Neighbors doing the same thing, Mike Evans going for career marks, individual season marks like Zach Ertz, as we saw on Sunday Night Football. All of these will come to light as the week goes on. So be ready to jump on some of these props, because it's not as if the books don't know these contract incentives or career milestones. They're not going to be putting Mike Evans' yards at 60. The yards are going to be in the upper 70s, probably the low 80s if we're being honest, even mid 80s. So be ready to take it over 82 if you want to alt it up to 90 plus, whatever it might be, to ensure that he gets there. Those are the type of things we can look at. Tough situations would be like an Eagles-Giants kind of thing. And this line's only 3. We don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to play. He obviously didn't start this past week. It was Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett then gets hurt. Saquon is pushing towards the single-season rushing record. However, the Eagles have nothing to play for. So the Eagles potentially sitting their starters, that would be par for the course normally. But do they want to have Saquon out there for the first half? Do they want to have, will Kenny Pickett start? That's just something we just don't know. But the starters playing, that's a separate story. So like I said, the Buccaneers is the ideal situation. They have something to play for and win, and there's a player going for a contract incentive. This is the opposite, where they have a player going for like a career record or career season record, whatever you want to call it, but they actually have no reason to play and win, and actually keeping Saquon, the offensive line, and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith healthy, that's the main priority. So that will develop as the week goes on. And this might be a situation where we just take the Eagles' first half and then expecting that Saquon gets yards and then they sit him in the second. So it'd be Eagles' first half, a Texans' first half bets, those type of things that they get the offenses out there. They treat it like a preseason game, get a couple drives from them, a couple quarters, and then they pull all their starters. That's what we could be looking at this week. Stay tuned. Pro Football Today postgame show. One more segment coming up after the break.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Well, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on? Welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. Monday Night Football is over. We are looking at Week 18, a wide range of outcomes for different teams, a varying degree of motivation for different teams, motivation for players, contract incentives, career milestones, regular season records, you name it, it's all on the table in Week 18. Let's take a look at the Bills at the Pats. The Bills are only 2.5-point favorites. It is juiced minus 120. 38.5 over-under. The Bills have nothing to play for. The Bills are locked into the 2 seed. Now, Drake May got hurt the other week, this past week. Now, he did return. Will he be out there? We don't know. When it comes to the Bills, Josh Allen is still vying for the MVP. A part of me wants to say that Josh Allen goes out there and plays the first half, puts up a couple touchdowns, and then is pulled from the game. Will the Pats be even able to score? So I have interest in the Bills at minus 2.5. I think this is the spot to grab them before it moves to 3. You just play the Bills. You just hope that Trubisky, even with some secondary players, can take care of a dreadful Patriots defense, and the Bills still come away with the win. So I think 2.5, even though it's minus 120, I still think minus 2.5 is the play for the Bills. And frankly, Trubisky, he's got to see what some of these other quarterbacks have done, not this year. Like, I'm not going to say a Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, but like, see, Trubisky should go out there and put out some good tape. Like, he's a former starter. A lot of teams are going to need quarterbacks next year, and there's only so many in the draft, only so many that are going to be ready, et cetera, et cetera. Trubisky should want to go out there and put up a good performance. So I guess I'm talking myself into the Bills more and more at -2.5. That's a spot that I would certainly look. Commanders -3.5 going up against the Cowboys. Commanders are on the road in Dallas. It's a 44.5 over/under. Obviously, fireworks for the Commanders in a lot of their late games. I think we could look to the Commanders at -3.5. It's obviously past the key number. If you simply want to take the Cowboys, that's fine. If you want to wait to see if it moves back to 3 and then jump on the Commanders there, I think that's certainly fine. Again, I think the Commanders should need to win. Right now, they have the tiebreaker over the Green Bay Packers in terms of the 6th, 7th seed in the NFC. And the Commanders, they win the tiebreaker over Green Bay based on percentage, based on best win percentage in conference games. So obviously both teams are playing conference games to end there. So if the Commanders come away with the win and the Packers come away with the win, Commanders would take it. So look to operate normally on offense. The Commanders should have their players out there. Now, Falcons -7.5 taking on the Panthers, a 48.5 over/under. Michael Penix, again, last night looked good. He didn't look great. And the Falcons need to win. And -7.5 seems like a lot to lay for a team and a quarterback that really haven't proven too much. And granted, the Panthers just got absolutely smoked this past weekend by the Bucs. But prior to that, the Panthers had been looking pretty good. They've been looking pretty solid over the last, let's say, 3 out of the past 4 weeks. They covered versus the Chiefs. They took the Bucs to overtime, and then they beat the Cardinals, if that's the correct order of events for the Panthers, and then they got smoked this past weekend. I kind of want to take the 7.5 points with the Panthers. Right? That's where So they beat the Chiefs. They take the Bucs to overtime. They go on the road and they cover as 14.5-point underdogs against the Eagles. They lost to the Cowboys. Then they beat the Cardinals. Not up to date on my series of events for the Carolina Panthers, Regardless of that, I think the Panthers can cover this game. I'm not going to say they're going to win, but I think the Panthers have been playing better to close out the season. I will take the Panthers at +7.5. I will take the Commanders if they move to 3, and I will take the Texans first half team total if we get confirmation that Stroud and Mixon and Collins will be starting. That's really going to be one of my favorites of the week. The Texans needing to go out there and prove it to themselves that they can still score on offense, go out, score in the first half, score in the first quarter, whatever it might be, and then pull their starters to get their rest in the second. That's what I will ultimately be looking for. Of course, as these plays get posted, I will tweet them all out over on Twitter at Tom_Vecchio1. And of course, Mike Evans, 90 plus, 100 plus, whatever it might be, wherever we get his lines, he will break this, or he will break through 1,000 yards to maintain his 1,000 yards per season. And of course, the Bucs need to still win. It is the ideal spot in Week 18 of the NFL. Stay tuned here on SportsGrid. Pro Football Today post-game show is done. I'll see you guys around.